got to build on. In other words, we're not starting from scratch even at the federal level. And I've sort of, to balance this out, I put this scaling down as opposed to scaling up with the last slide. There's a lot going on in Florida. In fact, I've been visiting Florida for various work purposes over the last couple of years, quite a lot. In fact, I was in Tallahassee 2 weeks ago, and actually in Governor Chris' office. And it is quite interesting, you know, these climate summits. I know, I'm sure everybody in this room has their own views as to why Governor Chris has got involved in this, but nevertheless, you know, this is showcasing climate change. This is good for Florida. In fact, there's a green buildings, green environments congress going on literally this week as we speak. In fact, yesterday and today. So Florida actually is acting as quite a sort of magnet for some of these initiatives, the broader sort of debate in terms of both climate change, green build, and you know, all of these related areas. So I think you're in a great position. I mean, from what you're doing in the university, being able to also leverage off what is going on in literally your backyard, the state. And how do universities, and how does your university in particular actually capitalise on, you know, the global, the national, and local and state initiatives going on? There's a lot of other initiatives going on in universities, and again, I'm sure you're all too familiar with what's going on here. The AASAG, the President's Climate Change Commitment, and so forth. Now, you know, from this, as I say, there's a heck of a lot actually going on. Even at student level, we've got this graduate pledge, which I did go on your website recently, and I noticed that your students are signing up to this as well. And this is also interesting in terms of this is the bank, as it were, of all of these colleges and universities that are actually involved in these sorts of initiatives. So this movement, as it were, is spreading throughout AG. So it's not just here, although, as I say, I think Florida has taken some measure of leadership in this across the university sector, which is great. And that's the recent sort of climate leaders president's report as well. So there's a lot also going on that's involving the student body as well. I don't know if there's much interest or so far in this. The Environmental Association for Universities and Colleges as well. I mean, they've been doing quite a lot of work on the whole sort of sustainability issue. So, as I say, I could go on further with listing these, but it's important because then it's important for two things. I mean, on the one hand, you're not alone. You know, you're part of this movement. You're leading many of these sorts of initiatives here at the university. But you know, at the same time, I think that very often, when you're in the vanguard of something like this, it's all the more difficult if you feel you're the voice in the wilderness. So I think what we're seeing within the higher education sector as a whole is so much more in interest, and obviously these initiatives are helping that interest. And again, I won't dwell on what you're doing, but I mean, in terms of, you know, you've made some already, I think, very substantial headway in terms of well, for a start, establishing the Office of Sustainability, but also getting together your plan and really having a roadmap in terms of where you want to be, you know, just 10 years out or further. So, and again, sort of actually feeding that into sort of new course design as well. Now, I don't know if you have much of an involvement with some of these UN decades, but it's actually, we're midpoint now in the UN decade for education in sustainable development. And again, I don't want to sort of over-dwell on some of these aims and objectives, but there again, I think they're useful. They're a useful sort of point of departure in terms of where we could be going in the whole sort of university sector. Now, again, it's fairly fairly standard stuff in a way, but I think that because we've got this, let's say it's the United Nations decade, which goes from 2005 to 2014, and some of these things are actually quite good. I was involved in the disaster decade. I shouldn't admit that really, but anyway, it wasn't all disaster. But I mean, they actually generate quite a lot of funds going into these particular areas, and I'm really pleased to say it's actually sustainable development for this decade. But effectively, what they do is facilitate the networking, linkages, exchange, interaction. So this is global, and again, if the university is part of this already or is contemplating this, I think there's a lot to be gained from participating in these sorts of things. Foster an increased quality of teaching and learning in education for sustainable development. I think that is absolutely critical, because you know the whole area, I think, something new. Very often people haven't really sorted out the benchmarks. You know, what's best practice, what's good, what's bad in this. It's, you know, we're still in a little bit of I think a quality dilemma in terms of what are we teaching and how are we teaching it in higher education. This is really to help countries make progress to the Millennium Development Goals. And again, I don't know, Millennium Development Goals are primarily geared for developing countries, but there again, you know, sustainability as a whole includes this whole sort of social aspect. We should be concerned about trying to help and get, you know, our sort of educational messages out to a very much wider audience beyond our immediate boundaries. You know, sometimes I think it is a case we'll find universities can be very inward-looking in terms of the day-to-day aspects. You've got your students, you've got your own curriculum, but really, you know, where do we go to try and sort of get out and maybe even have an international influence? And that could well be part of one of your aims in terms of where you're going and direction. And obviously provide new opportunities to incorporate education for sustainable development in some of the education reform efforts. So there's a lot in that. Again, I think it actually does help these sorts of UN initiatives to actually get some sort of real sort of overview and sort of cohesion to what people are doing here. Now, just again as an example, because I think there is just so much going on, but I think this particular conference, New Dynamics of Higher Education and Research for Societal Change and Development. This also is something which I don't know if anyone's participating in this, but in terms of actually trying to figure out the direction of where sustainability is going in higher education, I think this Congress, which as I say is actually coming up in July, again is trying to move the field forward, is trying to get very much more the higher education to do a little bit more, I think, self-examination. You know, what are we doing in terms of, are we getting more courses in sustainability up, you know, specialist courses? Are we integrating sustainability across our courses? You know, exactly what are we teaching to actually benefit sustainability? So, you know, I think that sort of self-examination through these sorts of conferences is quite important. And just to really pass on, so I'm sort of looking at the time, I'm trying to do this quickly. But in terms of future knowledge requirements, higher education is obviously trying to train people, I shouldn't say trying, is training people for their sort of future and global futures. It's a bit of a movable target though. I mean, what we need today is maybe different from what we needed 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. So that's good. I mean, we're always pushing the boundaries in terms of what universities do best, not only teaching but research. But at the same time, the more we research problems of